Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be battling planet-eating supervillain alongside our family in The Fantastic Four: First Steps, and then seeking revenge against an immortal soldier who wronged us in The Old Guard 2. That's two films that I keep forgetting have "the" at the beginning of the title. But before we dive into that, Nick, what have you been up to recently, and did it have "the" at the beginning of the title?
I mean, I guess it could, but technically it doesn't. I've been reading Saucer Country, a comic series by Paul Cornell and Ryan Kelly, which actually I think started off at some point in the 2000s and has been continuing very slowly ever since then, and finally had its conclusion released as part of a Kickstarter a Zoop campaign, the other crowdfunding site just for comics, earlier this year, or possibly last year at this point. Time gets away from me. So yeah, I thought, having enjoyed Paul Cornell's other work, and now that this series finally has an ending after about 12-13 years, I would finally give it a go. Okay, so yeah, this is a sci-fi political thriller comic about a politician, Arcadia Alvarado, who is fighting for the Democratic nomination for president, but also the dark secret in her past is that she was at some point abducted by aliens. And this, of course, keeps threatening to come out, and this being a sci-fi comic, also the fact that she was abducted by aliens and that there are, aliens involved in the story does become a material part of the plot and ends up drawing her into a web of conspiracies about alien interference throughout history and, of course, their interference in the running of the country itself right now. And yeah, this ran for I think about 20 issues in the end, with the final issue that was published as part of this Zoop campaign. So yeah, I was able to read the whole thing from beginning to end, and yeah, it's good. It's got a lot of good backstabs and twists and turns, the sort of conspiracy thriller stuff you want. Just when you think you understand what's going on, something else opens up. Ryan Kelly's art is really good as well. He's, I think, perhaps a bit of an under-recognised artist, because a lot of the books he's really good on are stuff like this, which perhaps have a little bit more people talking in rooms and a bit less people punching each other. This is a political thriller. He does get to draw quite a lot of cool aliens, but there's also quite a lot of, conference room scenes. So, yeah, perhaps not always the most showy work, but it's really, really good, and he's got a really good sense of, subtle character. He also did Cry Havoc with Cy Spurrier, which we covered quite a few years ago now, which had a bit more action in it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that sounds very familiar, and I'm sure we discussed it in the podcast.
Yeah, he did Cry Havoc, another under-recognised series that went a bit under the radar. But yeah, this was a big piece of work for him a few years ago, and with Saucer Country, it always seemed a shame it didn't win wider acclaim, but I'm glad they finally got to finish it off. It's clearly a very personal project for Paul Cornell, who is quite into the sort of Fortean Times UFO mythology stuff, and this was clearly his big attempt to put it into his work. And yeah, it's good fun. It's out there now. I think there's a massive volume called The Completed Saucer Country, which has the whole series from beginning to end. It's worth a look.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Definitely my sort of thing, combining both sci-fi and political thrillers. So yeah, very interesting. So yeah, this is set present day, I assume, or around about the present?
Well, it's taken, as I say, about 13 years to come out. So Cornell started it in March 2012, and then the final issue came out last year. It is, I guess, interesting to think about the change in the political climate that's taken place between when he wrote the first few storylines of Saucer Country and when he wrote the finale. But yeah, it's set present day within those parameters.
Yeah, I guess it's the classic thing, like a lot of TV shows have this when they're set over a short period of time but come out over quite a few years. Yeah, so 13 years is, I guess, quite a long time for a project, and I suppose it's like when he began, this was more sort of like the Hillary Clinton era. I don't know, does the main characters sort of reflect that? Do they bring in more sort of like Trumpian themes as the story went on, I suppose, and they were responding to contemporary politics?
I mean, the actual publication history of this is there were 14 issues with DC Vertigo in the early 2010s, not the late 2000s, as I incorrectly said earlier. I'm just going to put that correction in rather than try and make myself edit around it. And then there was another 6 issues with a different publisher in, I think, the late 2010s. And then finally there was this big collected edition with the one issue to finish the story, which came out a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's come out in dribs and drabs over about 12-13 years. Yeah, I think you can see, especially when they come back in the late 2010s with the next 6 issue chunk. Yeah, the first chunk was Saucer Country, the next chunk was called Saucer State. And in Saucer State, I think there's a bit more effort to reflect, modern day disinformation, Trumpian politics, conspiracy theories, which obviously, it's not that hard to incorporate that part because it plays very much into the themes of the comic.
Yeah, I can see how that would work very well. Yeah, disinformation, social media discussions, it does relate to UFOs, which is probably one of the few conspiracy theories that MAGA world has not embraced. Although I'm sure there's people out there who believe that, that Joe Biden is an alien or something like that, or possessed by an alien. Definitely there's a sort of 40 times element to modern politics. Certainly we do live in the age of conspiracies and strange stories.
Yeah, which makes it almost weirdly prescient, or at least, I don't know, is plausible the right word when you're dealing with a story that does have literal aliens in it? I don't know. But yeah, considering it's something that's taken 13 years to reach its conclusion, it's impressive how not particularly dated it feels.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of fevered element of politics has only grown stronger in the last few years. It does sound actually quite prescient when you put it that way.
I mean, as you said about Hillary Clinton, I think there probably is a certain degree of that. I guess it came out in, as I say, 2012, 2013 originally.
Yeah, so sort of definitely the sort of latter period of the Barack Obama years.
Yeah, after Obama had been re-elected, or around the time Obama was being re-elected. And I guess people were maybe starting to think, okay, what's next? Probably Hillary Clinton, maybe. And, well, obviously, the character, Arcadia Alvarado, is a Hispanic governor of New Mexico. So, again, there's a level of progressive optimism in terms of who might get elected next.
Yeah, I guess also sort of brought along by the Barack Obama era. I mean, New Mexico being a swing state, it's the sort of place that governors go on to become presidents, like Bill Clinton from Arkansas and places like that. So it looks like he's done his research to make it as believable as possible.
I guess, there is a lot of material about American politics to research, but it doesn't come across as a British guy writing America badly. Admittedly, that's from my perspective as a British guy. If there's any Americans out there who read this and cringed, then let me know. But it seems to gel with my research, which of course largely consists of my viewing of the West Wing.
I was about to say, we've all had a primer in American politics from the West Wing, which is, very well researched and uses a lot of insider information, even though obviously it's from quite a few years ago now. Plus, we get other regular updates in popular culture from Veep and other things. And of course, the fact that our media ecosystem is entirely saturated with American news and American politics, despite not living in America, especially during the Trump era when people just cannot stop writing about Trump, including us. Well, talking about Trump.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's not the hardest thing to research or indeed to get right, but maybe there's a certain level of West Wingism with a character like Arcadia Alvarado, who is this progressive governor who's, leading us in the continued direction of progress and change. But then again, it was the Obama era, and maybe it wasn't at that point considered that wildly naive and implausible to believe that might happen.
No, exactly, yeah. And I do like stories that have these broad sweep conspiracy theories. They're kind of, I guess, taking in a lot of history, the idea that these aliens have been meddling in human affairs for a long time and shaping our history. They're not a recent arrival.
Well, there are a few standalone issues sometimes with guest artists that go a bit into the effect of aliens on history or the role of aliens in mythology, that sort of thing. As I say, it's clearly a personal interest topic for Cornell, so he's having some fun here getting a lot of his ideas or research into it. And it's good. It reads like something that's got some personal investment from the writer. It's him putting one of his passions into a series. And but he's known mostly, I think, for his Doctor Who and adjacent stuff, Paul Cornell. But this is a fun other side of his work.
Yeah, I did read the Rivers of London-esque London police magic thriller that he wrote, which was, it's pretty good. There was some clever twists and turns, weaving London's sort of landscape into a sort of mythological London was very good. So he's certainly a good writer. And again, I very much enjoyed his Doctor Who's, especially he did the two-parter in the third series when the Doctor's human.
Yeah.
That one's very good. Still a standout, from the Tennant era to this day.
Yeah, no, it was a great episode. I remember weeping profoundly over it.
Yeah. I've always wanted actually to dive into some of his comic stuff, having seen his TV work and his novel work. It's impressive that he can write in so many different mediums that, although they're, broad storytelling mediums, there is definitely precise skills for each one, and just because you're good at one doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good at another.
Yeah, no, he's done some good stuff in all those mediums. His other comics work he's done, I'm probably going to forget something, but he did a series called I Walk with Monsters at Vault Comics a few years ago that was pretty good, and in the late 2000s. Okay, let's assume it's the late 2000s. It's about then. He did a Captain Britain series with Marvel, which was actually quite a lot of fun. It was a quite sincere attempt to do superheroes against a sort of knowing, fun Britishness, including sort of regional British superheroes and stuff, which I quite enjoyed. So yeah, he's done a lot of good work.
I'm sure regional British superheroes has a lot of potential for humour and interesting characterisation. I'm just trying to think of like a Birmingham-based superhero.
Funnily enough, I think that does come up.
Yeah.
Good old Captain Birmingham. Anyway.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
So anyway, yep, that's what I've been doing. Alistair, how about you?
So I've watched a very good, quite funny British comedy. This one's sort of flown under the radar a bit, so I'm pleased to give it a bit of a shout out here. So I've seen The Ballad of Wallis Island, starring Tim Key, Kerry Mulligan and Tom Basden. It seems to be very much like a passion project for the people involved, in that it's based on a short film by Tim Key and Tom Basden. It's written by those two. It's produced by the three stars and the director, James Griffiths. So yeah, it's definitely a low-budget passion project. The plot is that Tim Key is this sort of eccentric rich guy who lives on this tiny island where there's not even a pub. There's just like one shop and like one phone box and like a few other things. And he's hired Tom Basden, who is a formerly successful folk artist who's now kind of gone in a more poppy direction. He's hired him to come and do a private gig for him. Most of the film is just the two of them hanging out. The Herb McGowan, the Tom Basden character, who's kind of quite cynical and finds the whole thing quite tedious, and then like Tim Key is a sort of nervous chatterbox who's fanning over him the whole time. And it's kind of the sort of mismatched buddy thing. There's a lot of humour there. Tim Key is just effortlessly hilarious. Created this sort of very warm and nice, but also like quite socially awkward and cringe character. And then there's a few other twists and turns along the way, which we can get into. But yeah, Kerry Mulligan turns up as his former songwriting partner and sort of ex-lover. There's a few other like character revelations. But if you're interested in a sort of warm British comedy that's also got like a slightly socially awkward edge to it, then I can highly recommend this.
Yeah, no, I have seen some advertising for that, although possibly it has been slightly drowned at the cinema by, the sort of mainstream superhero films we talk about in our main segments. But yeah, though, Tim Key's good. I've enjoyed a lot of the stuff I've seen him in, including Mickey 17 earlier in the year when he turned up in a chicken suit, I believe.
Yeah, that was that was very funny, I must say. Yeah, it was sort of bizarre that like Tim Key is probably one of the most recognisable contemporary British comedians, because he's actually been in a Hollywood film with Robert Pattinson. Just one of those bizarre things that's happened. He's very good in this.
Yeah, no, he's great. He's got a very sort of enjoyable, sort of unique, slightly surreal presence. Like, I was randomly watching him on Taskmaster a few months back, and he's very good on that as well. He's got the right sort of fun, knowing, surreal, slightly smug vibe going on. And yeah, he's always entertaining when he turns up. So yeah, no, I should watch this.
Yeah, I've heard he was very good in Taskmaster. Yeah, we've seen Tim Key doing sort of, live comedy. I've seen him recording two podcasts. One was the Pappy's Christmas Show, and one was Richard Herring's Leicester Square podcast. Yeah, he's very funny on podcasts. He's done funny stuff, with Steve Coogan in recent series of Alan Partridge. This film is also produced by Steve Coogan, and there's a sort of slightly Partridge-esque social awkwardness to it, although it's not like super socially awkward, like Partridge or Nathan Barley or something like that. But a lot of the humour does come from basically, the Tim Key character sort of nervously voicing every single thought that comes into his head in this constant like running commentary of just kind of slightly awkwardness, which is just really, really funny, because Tim Key's one of those people who's just like effortlessly hilarious.
Yeah, no, that's a good description. Yeah, he is just a good, funny presence on screen. And yeah, it's good to hear the actual film's good as well. They've managed to get Kerry Mulligan for it, which I guess gives them a bit of star cred.
Yeah. She's probably the most famous person in certainly the most famous person in Britain. She's probably achieved British national treasure icon. I think she's like the addition that wasn't in the original short film, because it looks like, this is very much a pick-up project done by Tim Key, Tom Basden and James Griffiths. And she has like another dimension to the film, this element of like being, the ex of the singer-songwriter and his former songwriting partner. So there's sort of one of the sort of plot points is that they used to be a very like folky, traditional folk ballad type act with like them writing and singing together, and then they've since split up, gone their separate ways, and he seems to have become a sort of like electro big beats kind of club act, which is just sort of hilarious when you see kind of like the artwork for his albums and stuff that looks like really like, I don't know, ridiculous with this way this guy's trying to restyle himself as electronic artist, and he's trying to really like push that aspect of his career and trying to claim it's like artistically credible, despite the fact also everyone wants to talk about is his folk songs from years ago. So there's a sort of commentary on fame and artistic careers there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, one thing I will say about this film is I've seen the posters and I wasn't really sure what sort of film it was going to end up being. If anything, I thought it might be some sort of life-affirming thing like The Outrun or something, or some sort of possibly even a parody of that. But having just seen a couple of posters and not the trailer, yeah, I was uncertain exactly what was involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a comedy than The Outrun, which is a sort of hard-hitting drama. Although, yeah, I've got the Google knowledge page up for The Ballad of Wallis Island, and yeah, it says also searched for The Outrun and The Salt Path, which is another film that just came out recently. That's another sort of, I don't know, life-affirming rural Britain set film. Yeah, coastal films, I suppose. The Outrun is also set on a small island, that one in Scotland. So yeah, I don't know, there's this like theme of like British wilderness and small islands and coasts. But I mean, The Ballad of Wallis Island, other than just being like an independent British film of the same era, there's definitely thematic similarities. It does have that warm, like life-affirming nature to it. I mean, I don't want to spoil like the plot, but like, it is a sort of film where like, people learn some like, profound lessons and they grow, and then there's like warmth and stuff. It's not as dark sometimes as like Partridge can be, like leading, although it's got that socially awkward comedic element, but like leaving the characters like worse off at the end than they did just for the sort of dark humor purposes. Yeah, it's got that thing you kind of want that runs through a lot of British films of it being like heartwarming, people coming together. There's like, life affirmingness to it. So, I mean, if you wanted to watch two back-to-back films about small British islands, The Outrun is one that will make you cry and feel awful, and then the Ballad of Wallis Island will give you a similar emotional tone, but with some more sort of uplifting, nice vibes at the end.
Okay, so there's some dramatic heft here then. Tim Key is having to do a bit of serious acting.
Yeah, there is some serious acting. Like I say, when the Kerry Mulligan character comes in and like they're excavating their like past emotions. Yeah, there's a few other like main points. The thing is also that like the Tim Key character, his wife had died 9 years ago, and it was her who got him into the music that he's now like completely obsessed with. So there's clearly an element of like he's trying to recapture, his lost wife, and he's kind of stuck in that kind of past relationship and unable to move on. Like, yeah, now he's like, trying to get them to perform on the island. Yeah, again, it's a way to almost like be connected to her. So there are some like sad bits, I guess. There's, the characters have tragic backstories. They're digging into that. So it's not just pure comedy silliness. There is like, a strong emotional arc. But then again, there's also some very funny bits of like Tim Key leaving like food around the house for the Tom character when he's depressed, and then he just like ends up tripping over like pudding and things like that. So there's a range of emotions here.
Nice.
So yeah, I can definitely recommend this as it's a nice, warm, life-affirming film that gives you some laughs and stuff. Yeah, also is, it's very palatable. I can't imagine anyone who would like object to this film. It's a very easy film to like, and especially I guess like the core of it is like, well, mainly the back and forth between Tim Key and Tom Basden. Obviously, it's easy for Tim Key to steal the show as the bigger comedy character. I guess it is really like his film, but yeah, the kind of dynamic between them is very funny, and it's like an interesting portrait of an unlikely friendship.
Okay, and first up today, it's another major superhero film. In fact, it's another major superhero film, bringing back an early, somewhat upbeat, vaguely retro superhero property after a period of being somewhat dormant. Yes, it's Fantastic Four: First Steps, the new and 37th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is, of course, the latest adaptation of the Fantastic Four after two previous attempts to bring it back in the modern 21st century era of superhero films, this time set in an alternate reality off to the side of the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in which the foursome are the widely beloved celebrity heroes of their world. But, of course, their flawless record in saving the planet comes into danger when Galactus, a mysterious force who just wants to straight up eat the planet, turns up, and the Fantastic Four find themselves not only struggling to stop him, but possibly having to make a decision that may put them at odds with the rest of the world in doing so. And yes, the four here are played by Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, and Joseph Quinn. We have seen this film. Alistair, what did you think of it?
So it was certainly a fun time at the cinema. It's a hard film to dislike, really. It's entertaining. It's got sort of a very beautiful colour palette and aesthetic. I did really like the atomic retroism stroke atom punk kind of aesthetic that runs through the whole thing. That was probably actually my favourite aspect of this film. But I guess it's one of those things that like it's good, but it's not one of the great Marvel films. It is an entertaining night in the cinema, but it's probably, less entertaining than Superman that we covered recently and is still very much in the cinema, or other Marvel films. It's got the sort of usual Marvel mix, some good casting, but I guess it's not, setting my world on fire or, something that I'm telling people to rush out and, go see this straight away.
Yeah, I think I'm slightly higher on the positives. It's very much, I really liked this. I didn't quite love it. It's definitely a fun time. I liked the fact that it felt a bit tangibly different to other superhero films, partly because it had this sort of, as Alistair said, this sort of 60s aesthetic. And also I think they've toned down the postmodern snark quite substantially. The Fantastic Four are not really postmodern characters. They're quite sincere characters. They're a family and they love each other. There's a little bit of bickering, but even by Fantastic Four comic standards, I've read a few in my time. It's not one of my main fandoms, but I have read them. In some of the comics, they really, really play up the bickering. You've seen it in some of the old films, if you've seen them. They full on play Ben and Johnny, the Human Torch and the Thing, like they're squabbling children. And here there's just, a bit of lovable back and forth banter, but nothing ridiculous. It's very nice, it's very pleasant. The cast, especially Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, who I think are kind of the core dynamic here, do a very good job of portraying this sort of family warmth. Yeah, it's a nice sort of cheerful sci-fi adventure. It's good to see a comics-accurate Galactus. I guess we can thank years of MCU movies for rolling the pitch to the point that they're actually willing to do this. But yeah, as you say, it maybe rolls off you a little bit. But I did like it, and I did think it was, yes, interestingly different to other films, or enough different to justify its existence.
Yeah, you're right that there's a sort of a complete lack of irony here, which is a welcome change from the sort of the running Marvel tone. And it's nice they've got a slightly different tone for this one, as well as a different aesthetic. And they are playing it very much straight up as this is about a family that love each other. The main plot line, other than Galactus trying to eat Earth, is Reed Richards and Sue Storm having a baby. There's a lot of warmth and love from within the family itself. And I suppose there is something to be said for, in these dark times, having a film that expresses warmth and love and in a sort of a non-ironic, quite genuine way is something nice to see. I mean, it's a fairly traditional model of a family. I guess it's not really breaking any boundaries in terms of expanding our definition of kind of love and family warmth. But it still has this whole loving and acceptance each other sort of thing running through it, which is nice.
Yes, it is a very traditional family, I guess, in keeping with the vaguely 60s aesthetic. Personally, I'm okay to let them have this one because it's not as if we're lacking films about scrappy found families.
No, that is true, and also it's I guess it's also its attempt to be comics accurate, and stick to the vibe that comes through the comic as well. Which again, I like the fact that they've done that rather than kind of trying to subvert it with postmodern snark.
Yes, the one concession to making it not just boys, apart from Sue, that they have made is changing the gender of the Silver Surfer, which I didn't bump on particularly. That character has a fairly small role all in.
No, I thought that was an interesting casting decision. It's Julia Garner as the Silver Surfer, I thought was good in the role. Gave the character some personality, despite the fact that it's probably largely done through layers and layers of computer-generated animation to make her look like a silver liquid. So yeah, giving the character some personality shows strong performance.
The main special effect here is probably Galactus, who is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they've done Galactus as a straight up giant Colossus person type thing. I think in the previous film that he appeared, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which might have been 20 years ago, which had Ewan Griffiths and Jessica Alba and Captain America Chris Evans back in an early role in it. I think in that film he was just a sort of cloud. I guess cinema audiences weren't prepared to accept I guess the giant purple space god eating planets, so they wanted something that was maybe a bit more sci-fi credible, the sort of planet dissolving cloud thing. But here they've gone for it straight up.
Yeah, and he's played very much as this massive, imposing, terrifying force of nature Colossus thing, and it's pretty impressive, to be honest. I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah, they've put a lot of effort into the character design and conveying the scale, which I really appreciated. And we talked about how in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, that totally went out the window and it makes things feel very unreal. For example, in the final bit of the film, and this isn't really spoilers, I mean, it's kind of in the trailer, that when Galactus comes to Earth and starts sort of rampaging through Manhattan, I think it's quite early on, they do a really good shot of Galactus walking past the Statue of Liberty, towering over it, and it really conveys very effectively the sense of scale of Galactus and how big he is, because everyone in the whole world knows roughly how big the Statue of Liberty is, that it's pretty big, and he is much bigger. I really thought that was a really clever way of saying this is grounding this action scene in you kind of have a sense of scale and proportion and threat. So that was I thought quite cleverly done.
Well, yeah, plus there's always a sense of the difference in proportion between, Galactus and the heroes. In the few scenes where they directly interact with him. They are very much tiny little bugs to him.
Yeah, I think he even says at one point something like clever bugs or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt that there's a lot of thought went into the character design there to make him feel like a presence in the film and something that you could get a sense of the scale and the threat that comes from that scale.
Yeah, and there's not a lot in the film other than Galactus, to be honest. I will say about this film, it's not, It's not messing around. They introduce this new universe and, the existing setup of the Fantastic Four. Again, they're playing the Spider-Man Homecoming recent Superman film card of just basically fast forwarding through the origin. There's a bit more effort to montage it, but they don't dwell on it at all. Yeah, they introduce the Fantastic Four. We get a few scenes to establish what they're about, and then okay, bang, it's Galactus time. Because they're doing this whole thing in under 2 hours. Once you take the credits out, it's probably not that much more than an hour and 3/4.
Yes, and I did like the fact that this is quite tight for a modern film, that it didn't overstay its welcome, certainly.
Yeah, honestly, and this is atypical for me, I guess. It zipped by so quickly that I almost felt like I could have used another 10-15 minutes to maybe give the characters a bit more room to breathe. But yeah, I cannot fault them for getting on with it. It definitely felt like a very dynamic, propulsive film as a result. It had a good sense of sort of adventure, I guess, in this idea of the Fantastic Four as, adventurers who went off and did things. It was quite strong, which I enjoyed. And the scene where they went into space to fight Galactus and they had that big chase with the Silver Surfer on the way back was good, exciting action, but I thought it felt, again, distinct from things that have been done before in recent superhero films.
Yeah, there hasn't been actually a huge amount of space chases and space fights for something that I guess it is sort of nominally part of the sci-fi genre, although I guess you could argue superheroes are separate from sci-fi, but let's leave that for a moment. But yeah, there isn't a huge amount of space chases and things like that. There's some in Guardians of the Galaxy film, obviously, but you think you're right, there is this real sense of an adventure and going on there. And I kind of wanted to say that it felt a bit retro, this whole kind of yes,
no kidding,
space adventure vibe, but maybe the retro things coming through from the deliberately retro aesthetic, and the fact that the tone feels a bit more old-fashioned. But it did feel a bit more like a 90s space adventure film with there's a big alien threat, and then they kind of shoot off into space. There's little thought given to the technology. They just kind of press a button and they can zip to another system and then have a fight there, and with and some cool chases around a neutron star and things like that, and some interesting special effects. So I mean, they've definitely got the sort of Marvel thing of there's a good chase, there's a good fight. When it gets down to the action, it's exciting, things like that. And they've got strong characters. They've got 4 strong characters that are well developed. So there's always this sense of character of them working together as a family in each action scene that gives you more than just special effects. There's always you feel the love of the family, and especially obviously with the bits when Galactus is trying to get Sue while she's pregnant. This sense of genuine threat, and you are very invested in the characters and felt the sense of peril. Those are all things that the film's doing well.
Well, yeah, but as I say, the family setup they're playing on here is quite a classic dynamic, so I guess arguably it's quite easy to get you to like and care about people in that scenario, but I think the film still does do a very good job of it. Yeah,
well, it does a good job because it does take the time to quickly establish the strong characters right at the beginning, so that's kind of how it does it.
Yeah, and I think the retro thing, I think clearly there's been a determination that the Fantastic Four are very sort of retro adjacent characters. Like it or not, this sort of classic family unit thing, this sort of gentle bickering, it does unavoidably have a certain old school vibe to it. So why not play into that, I guess, and put them full on in retro land and make this sort of vaguely retro tinged film where they're these sort of brave adventurers. And I think it's probably a more interesting and distinct way of doing it than just trying to force them a bit more into the more modern Marvel, again, sort of snarky postmodern template.
Yeah, I mean, I felt they did capture the sort of sense of adventure from the Atomic Age very well. Obviously, so yeah, the kind of atomic punk, slightly Fallout vibe that they've got for this film. I mean, a lot of people associate the Atomic Age with a lot of fear and the fact the world could be annihilated any moment, Cuban Missile Crisis. But at the same time, there was this real sense of adventure and possibility. There was the space race, new physics were being discovered, new engineering. People did have beliefs by the end of the century we'd be living on the moon and things like that. And it does capture that sense of boundless optimism and kind of bravery going forth, which is summed up well by a group of 4 superheroes who are adventurers. They were the first people in space and they do all these incredible things, pushing the boundaries of science forward and boldly going and where, people haven't gone before. And it does thematically capture the ideas and beliefs, I think, behind the kind of Atomic Age that a lot of atom punk stuff is referencing, as well as just using it as a cool artistic design backdrop. And it is beautiful. I love all the curved furniture and very Jetsons interior to their flat, and their flying car that looks kind of like an old Cadillac with all the curves and things like that, and their little robot that runs off a cassette tape that runs around helping them out and things like that. So I did like the aesthetic, and there's a lot of great work done here in production design and character design, the artworking. But underneath it all, they did, I think, successfully capture that sense of optimism and excitement that the Atomic Age brought.
Yeah, which works for me, I think. I think all you really want from these Marvel films is for each one to feel I don't know, like it's doing something that isn't the same as all the others. Like you're not just being served general all-purpose Marvel soup.
Yeah, especially when you're on film 37. I mean, like,
Yeah.
the standard audience needs to find something like, well, why see this film? And it was like we saw it on day of release and it was pretty much sold out. So it seems to have connected to some degree. I mean, they've got obviously high profile cast. You know, the buzz around this film is good. I think there's also an element of the setting it in this different reality with a very clear different aesthetic is almost a way of saying to people, like, don't worry about the previous 36 films, or if you've only seen a handful of the big ones, like, this one's kind of different. It's kind of fresh. You can just dive in here. This isn't like Captain America 4 or like Marvel 37. It's a new thing in its own right. It's a jumping on point. It's fun. It's entertaining. Like, come see it. And like the aesthetic works with that. The new cast works with that. And it does seem to be connecting with people. We'll see how it fares against Superman. That's probably been better received, including, I think, by us. But It's interesting that this does seem to be working on a marketing level as well as an artistic level.
Yeah, so it's interesting, that possibly interesting to the Fantastic Four's detriment, I'm not sure, as it's come out second and as it's maybe had a slightly less glowing critical reception. But they're both doing, as I sort of implied earlier, vaguely similar things. Like they're both introducing this sort of populated science fiction world. They're both introducing these characters who are maybe known for being a bit retro, a bit sort of old school. And whether, as I say, the fact that they're kind of maybe conceived in similar ways will mean that one has to lose out to the other, I don't know. But it's interesting that this is what we're doing this year.
Yeah, they released these two so close together, then there's a big gap before we get more superhero films. I mean, it's hard to compete against Superman, possibly one of the most famous superheroes out there, other than, I guess, like Batman and Spider-Man, maybe. It's interesting that Superman is one of the things that people have, like, just brought up generally in conversation. People who don't follow superhero movies, when Fantastic Four hasn't got to that point. But I mean, at the time of recording, it's only been out for about 2 days. We'll see how well it does. I think Marvel are clearly pushing this in a big way because it directly sets up the next Avengers film, and I guess also they want this as a jumping on point so that people go and see, you know, the Avengers film next year in the belief that it's basically a sequel to this, and like, oh, I like that Fantastic Four film, I like the vibe, I get what's going on, I want to go see like the next one, and it's coming out next year rather than having to wait like 8-9 years as we do with some of these Marvel films.
Which, as we said about Thunderbolts, is definitely an improvement, yeah. Part of me would always be more up for Fantastic Four 2 than them in an Avengers crossover, but I will be interested to see how they handle mixing this up with the more regular Marvel tone.
I'd be curious to see how prominent they are. I get the feeling they're going to be very prominent. You know, again, high-profile cast, and they've got a successful film now, and it's, you know, again, like, this is something mainstream audiences can get invested in and then go and see, you know, another big film next year. I'm sure there'll also be a big role for the Thunderbolts, you know, Florence Pugh and the rest of them. But again, because the film next year is basically positioned as a sequel to 2 successful films this year, because MCU does that sort of thing. But, you know, again, these are films people are like, oh yeah, I watched those films last year, I'm going to go see the sequel.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well that works going into Avengers. Yeah, I mean, Thunderbolts, although it was definitely the most critically successful Marvel film in a while, in terms of like reviews and reception from people like us who review these things, it wasn't actually that much more financially successful than Captain America Brave New World, which was critically annihilated. So yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how this does.
I mean, I guess there's a difference between what the public likes and pays money for and what critics like, and that applies to your popcorn blockbusters as much as it does to the difference between the art house films that win the accolades and film like Avatar that people actually pay to see. I don't see why this wouldn't connect with like a mainstream audience. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's a good film to go during the summer break for, you know, teenagers, and also, yeah, it's got sort of a cool retro vibe and aesthetic. There's some strong emotional moments. I don't necessarily want to spoil it, but there's definitely a big emotional moment right at the end of the film that did make me feel like, wow, this could really go either way. And also I had a sort of, yeah, a genuine sense of like, man, I am quite like, you know, emotionally invested in this and like on the edge of my seat to find out what happens next. So yeah, you know, it's more than just like special effects and giant things smashing cities. There is that kind of core characters and emotional element that I did resonate with.
Yeah, no, I do think this really works, yeah. It doesn't quite, I think, transcend, I think is the phrase we've used before. I'm not sure it's ever quite transcends and becomes a masterpiece, but it was a really good story and I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, and if you're going to see several films in the cinema, then definitely see this over certainly some of the things we saw advertised before it, such as, you know, Avatar 3 or Tron Ares. But I guess if you're only seeing one film this summer, as like, again, most people see about 2 films a year, a summer one and a Christmas one, I guess I'd see Superman. But if you want to see a second film, see this.
Okay, and last up today, it's The Old Guard 2. This is, of course, the sequel to the original Old Guard movie, which we watched during the pandemic. This is based on the comic series by Greg Rucka and Leandro Fernandez about a group of immortal warriors who now work as mercenaries in the modern world. And in this one, after their leader Andy lost her immortality at the end of the last one, they must now face the return of their fellow immortal Quinn, who was somewhat turned against them after she was locked beneath the sea in an Iron Maiden for 500 years. So yep, that's the setup. Alistair, we've seen this film. What did you think of it?
So I was excited with this film. We liked the first one, and we really liked the comic when we reviewed that back on the podcast. And the first film does have this very dramatic ending setting up the sequel with Quinn re-emerging and obviously clearly seeking revenge. And I felt this was a bit of a letdown. I think it lacks some of the charm of the first film and certainly the comic. It's a bit of a generic thriller. They fight goons. There's a few like boss villains. But it didn't have anything that was like particularly captivating. That said, there's some good fight sequences and a good cast. So it's not a total snooze fest.
I didn't like this very much, to be honest. Yeah, I too enjoyed the first one. I thought it was both a decent action film and had a certain amount of charm. Charlize Theron was very good and charismatic, and they also built up a good sort of supporting cast around her. This one I found a bit of a trudge. They seem to dramatically downplay a lot of the cast other than Charlize Theron into sort of white, flat supporting roles, and Theron herself doesn't get a huge amount interesting to do. Often in these sort of reviews I'd say at least she was good, but honestly she was just fine. She doesn't get anything here that saves the film. And the primary villain, Quinn, the one who has emerged from her Iron Maiden and is ready for a roaring rampage of revenge, just seems a bit sulky, to be honest. I've read a Reddit comments about this film. I think the basic gist was I was once stuck in a lift for 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure I was angrier than Quinn seems to be after being stuck in an Iron Maiden for 500 years. And
okay, yeah, that is pretty good. And it's very accurate.
That is not inaccurate for one of the problems with this film. Yeah, mild spoilers. I'm going to do a mild spoiler. I believe this spoiler is on one of the posters, so you're going to have to accept it. Uma Thurman does turn up as a sort of boss villain at some point, and she's got a bit more charisma and a bit more juice than the main villain, and her final scene with Charlize Theron might be one of the best scenes in the film, actually. But it's too late to save it at that point. It's unfortunately a bit of a boring plot.
Yeah, I mean, Uma Thurman, it's good casting, in terms of getting high-profile people. I'm surprised this didn't get a cinema run. It does have, names in it, but she's just a bit of a generic boss-level, evil, billionaire kind of stroke immortal person. It's not a huge amount of characterization going on there, and I do have the exact same note as you, which is that, the supporting cast really, bounced down to being just sort of generic other bodies in this film. There is not really much going on with them, which is a shame, because the first film had that really powerful speech that was great about the two members that were a couple that had been together for 1,000 years and how their relationship goes so far beyond love, because when you've been with someone for 1,000 years and you're still excited to see them every day, that's something else. And I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it, and that was a great moment, and this film has nothing on that level.
Yeah, no, it just doesn't seem that interested in the supporting cast, unfortunately. They're just kind of there to be meat for the fights. I guess the newcomer character still gets a bit of stuff to do as the sort of our eyes on this world angle, but not a huge amount, to be honest. The one character who does get a bit of an arc in this, I guess, is the Booker character who betrayed them in the previous film. And his arc here is, A, kind of predictable, and B, they seem to forget about his betrayal weirdly quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't do a huge amount for me either.
Considering the previous film ends with him being exiled for 100 years. I mean, one of the issues with this film is that, there are sort of almost no emotional stakes or things like that, in that, people just kind of weirdly, get on with stuff. I suppose that's not a commentary on what it's like to be thousands of years old, that basically you're, most things are waters off duck's back. But they get over the betrayal bizarrely quickly because, the film wants to move on. And also, again, Quinn's sort of rage and insanity for being drowned continuously for 500 years is, something that she just, again, brushes off and then starts to behave more like a normal person after that, which is bizarre because, that was, the one interesting thing that the film had, at the end of the first, my God, she is going to be angry and probably, insane after being locked under the sea for, 500 years. There should be some emotional impact to that and some weight. And I guess, I know it's an action film thriller. They don't want to really get into, how fucked up it would be to go through that. But at the same time, just being, a bit miffed is definitely not the tone I'd have gone for. sure.
Yeah, as you say, everything just seems a bit light. I mean, obviously, again, you don't want to be generic, I suppose, but there's a sort of rise and fall you normally want from these films, this sort of dramatic ramp up to the final confrontation. And when they got to the point where it was time to go off to the nuclear power plants, or whatever it was, and have a showdown, there wasn't really a sense of drama as they assembled for the final battle. It was very much a, well, we've had a phone call, better go. Maybe part of that is pacing. Like, I'm not going to bother dropping the actual spoiler, but suffice to say, there is a cliffhanger on this film. It does feel very much like it was meant to be a two-part film with a proposed third one. The problem with doing that, we've seen this before in other similar things, is that because the all is lost moment is, I guess, meant to be the ending of this film, there's not really one in the actual film itself, and as a result, everything just feels like a bit of a straight line.
Yeah,
there's not really a moment where you feel that much emotional damage or much has really happened. Like, they really needed to make the battle with Quinn, the betrayed immortal, to be a bit more of a major thing in itself, and they seem, when the time comes, all too keen to just move past it and make it clear that what really matters is Uma Thurman.
Yeah. Again, I don't know, it's an interesting character they've added, but like, I kind of felt that like, if this is going to be the Quinn film, then Quinn kind of gets like sidelined a bit, and she is, again, more interesting character in that she has a long history with the main character, Andy, and also has this like horrible thing in her backstory about being trapped under the sea for so long. Yeah, again, there's not really enough Quinn in this film because this would be like her film, and like, you know, we just talk about Fantastic Four and they tease like Doctor Doom at the end. It'd be like making the next Fantastic Four film or Avengers film and not have that much Doctor Doom in it. It's just nonsensical decision, really. And Quinn very quickly moves past any sense of betrayal or anything that has any real emotional stakes in it, which isn't very good. I mean, I did kind of like the first bit when Andy and Quinn meet for the first time. There's some good, interesting sort of camera flourishes and then a sort of fight in sort of confined spaces of this corridor. This is very much a film that expresses its emotions through action scenes, and that one I thought was at least entertaining and stuff. But then after that, the film just clearly wants to move on to other things. It's like, oh, we've done Quinn meets Andy again, let's like push past that. I was a bit like, okay, I thought this was the point of the film, and also like I need like more emotional meat from this relationship.
Well, yeah, you get sort of Quinn going, and now I want to kill everybody. And then shortly later you get, oh, I'm over it now.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Or like, maybe I'm not a supervillain who wants to kill everyone.
Yeah, and also there was the cliffhanger at the end of the last film, or one of the cliffhangers, where the main character lost her immortality, which, again, I feel no need to spoil the plot in detail, but I don't really mind that much from that.
No, I guess it's just used as a way to show that, like, the people can be killed, so, like, you know, there are stakes. Yeah, that sort of works, and I guess it's like digging into the lore. I mean, I suppose this film being a quite generic thriller, what it didn't need was like more lore and more complex explanations of how the immortality thing works. But I guess in the absence of like digging into that in any kind of interesting way, you are kind of left with basically a film that's some army types shooting generic goons. And occasionally there's a talk about, I've known you for 1,000 years, and that's sort of just dropped into conversation as a kind of like an aside.
Yeah.
Which just leaves the film feeling quite generic.
Yeah, which also leads to the situation where most of the plot is left hanging for a proposed third one, and yeah, considering the views this has got and the lack of any interest that I've noticed, I'm not sure how optimistic I am about there being a third one.
No, I would have wanted more of an ending as well. Like, you know, I felt that like they introduced some villains and some dramatic circumstances, and you know, that should have come to a close, you know, and by all means set up like a sequel. I mean, the first film had a villain, and the villain, is dispatched at the end and stuff, and it's, whereas this film just, is very much like part one of a two-part thing. I guess the only resolution you get is that right at the end is the Quinn plotline is resolved. Again, if this was supposed to be the Quinn film, there's not really enough Quinn in it. And the rest of the plot is just basically setting up a sequel, which I guess unlikely to happen.
So yeah, this was a bit disappointing. Sorry, old guard fans.
Yeah, it's a shame, because the first one, although, like, I mean, the comics were probably the best incarnation of this story. The first one had something that made it, like, a little, like, interesting, like, again, exploring the immortality thing, made it more than just people with swords and guns, like, shooting sort of generic kind of heavies. But this film really just falls back on that.
Yes, obviously, it's my duty to agree that, yes, the comics were best. Read the comics, they're good.
Yeah.
They did a second series of the comics, and it's much better than this.
That's all we have time for. Thank you for listening to this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. If you would like more from us, then you can visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and written pieces by Nick and myself. Also, if you like this podcast, please leave us a review online, as it helps other people find out about the show.
And if you enjoy this podcast so much that you want it in your feed even when you're not listening to it, you can follow us on Blue Sky or on Facebook, where you can get the latest updates on what we're doing outside of this podcast, as as well as when our episodes are coming out. And yes, beyond that, you can also follow me on social media. I am nickbryan.com with a dot on Blue Sky and with the word dot on Instagram. And there's also a website at, you guessed it, nickbryan.com, where you can find out more about my self-published comics.
And you can find more from me where I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky and TikTok by searching for Alistair Ball. You can also find my writing at redtrainblog.com and my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. Or if you want even more, you can join us in 2 weeks' time for the next episode, when we will be discussing 2 TV shows that we have both enjoyed a lot in the past. Yes, it's the 2nd season of Poker Face and the 4th season of The Bear. Will they live up to their previous seasons? Tune in 2 weeks to find out. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.